The coronavirus pandemic has passed a tragic milestone. After first being detected in China in late December, in just over 3 months, the number of confirmed cases passed the 1 million mark on April the 2nd. The speed at which it spread has exposed not only weaknesses in global coordination during a health crisis, it's also reopened deep political wounds. Worse than Brexit, that's how some European officials have described the economic impact from the coronavirus. Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has blasted the EU's slow response, saying its very foundations are threatened. Mirroring past fractures, southern EU countries are asking for cheap loans to mitigate the fallout from shutting down their economies. The richer North has refused squabbling over who should take charge now that millions of Europeans are out of work. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, U.S. President Donald Trump continues to face a near-daily barrage of criticism over his often contradictory statements. Having the most confirmed cases of COVID-19, U.S. health officials are scrambling to contain its spread while treating the growing number hospitalized by the virus. And to break that all down, joining me now from London is Ozan Ozkural, the CEO of Tanto Capital Partners, and from Rome, Marco Carnelos, who is a former Italian ambassador. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk and thanks for joining us. The humanitarian, economic and political picture darkens as confirmed cases pass the 1 million mark, shutting down businesses and placing millions of people under a lockdown around the world. So, Marco, I want to start with you. How will this coronavirus pandemic, in your opinion, reshape the global order? Will it be better or worse?
I'm afraid to say that it's going to be worse for the simple reason that this event is so unprecedented that I don't know if the world leadership, especially the European and the American ones, will be able to draw the right lesson from what's up. We didn't see anything similar since the end of Second World War, but we could be at a very, very dramatic turnaround for our way of life, our system, our civilization in a way, because the impact that this event is going to have on economy and social relationship is so hard that I really don't know if after the day after, the world will be the same.
Do you believe the people are ready to adapt to this new system already?
It's not a matter if the people are ready or not. It's a matter if the people are ready in a way to accept what is going to happen. I'm afraid it's not going to be a matter of choice, but simply to resign to what is what the events are dictating to us, changing our way of life up to a certain point.
All right. Ozan, give us an overall evaluation of the global economic outlook. Do you believe this downward trajectory will somehow prompt the world leaders to revisit their economic policies, healthcare systems, and socio-economic inequalities?
Aisha, thank you. I think the answer is very simple. They have to. This is unprecedented when it comes to the amount of disruption that it is causing and it is likely to cause to the global economy and governance at large. I mean, look, we all live in a global village right now. We are more interconnected than ever. We live in a time where there is mass urbanization. More than 50% of people live in big cities. Last year, we have taken over 4.5 billion passenger flights. So therefore, we are living as one in the world. So what does this mean? As opposed to how the governments reacted in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, this is not going to be a monetary policy approach. There is no monetary policy tools to really speak of that can help this. This will be fully economically a fiscal policy issue. However, what the governments, we'll all see how the governments react, because all of them, even within Europe, they're reacting very differently. It is about the propensity and the power of the governments to be able to flex their bureaucratic muscles to make sure that the fiscal stimulus, the helicopter money, quote unquote, goes to the people's pockets directly and quickly. It is going to be a toss-up between being accurate and being fair. But the fact of the matter is, what we have to avoid, what governments will have to avoid, is a repeat of 2008, where the helicopter money ended up making the rich people richer because it was basically created as a price bubble. In this case, it has to go to people's pockets. This means two things. The government and private sector, especially the banking sector, have to be working in an incredibly coordinated fashion. Banks are going to be used to recapitalize home balance sheets. Right now, not all banks are quite willing to toe the line that the governments are giving, but they will have to.
Yes.
And I think we're going to enter an area where for the next 2-3 months, which is, I think, the maximum duration that we can all handle the crisis as it is, for the next 3 months, many people are not going to pay anyone.
Okay.
So, go on.
So you say it should be accurate, but at the same time fair. We'll see how it's gonna fold.
It's going to be accurate. It cannot be accurate and fair.
At the
What I'm
same
saying
time,
is
you
it's going
say,
to be
okay.
a function. It's going to be a function of speeds.
All right. Marco, you have recently written the lessons of the 2008 financial crisis have been deliberately ignored, and doing the same with the 2020 lessons is not an option. What's the way out of this crisis?
It's just to adopt the opposite economic measure that were adopted after 2008. And so put the money in the pockets of the people. This time must be the more disaffected one that are not going to be the people in the financial system. They can survive anyway. I mean, the economic measure this time must be shared with as much as possible the population. The experience of 2008 was dramatic, especially in Europe with the austerity measures. They didn't achieve anything in terms of budget, but they created a devastating effect in cutting social services, health system. And the result now is that this health system, almost everywhere, are unprepared for such a pandemic of such a scale. With the images that we are watching daily. What is really important at the moment is just to include measure that is not going to benefit the usual suspects. For the many, not the few. And especially the European leaders in the following days will have to decide if they have to follow the steps of 2008 or they should change their approach and to start taking care of all the section of the population,
yes,
and not only some limited sectors.
So to which extent do you believe this pandemic exposed the deep-running fractures within the European Union? Because as Russia, China, Cuba, and lastly Turkey have all rushed to the aid of Italy and Spain, filling that void, how do you think this will impact European public opinion once this crisis is over towards those some alienated countries?
Well, it's going to be quite difficult for European public opinion, and especially for the Italian one, to continue to keep what the Europe has done in the proper perspective. In the sense, at the beginning, Europe was not reacting properly. We have to recognize it. And also yesterday, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, recognized that at the beginning, European countries has not been so helpful for Italy. Now the situation in the last day is changing, but what will remain in the narrative and in the memory of the people, that one of the most, I wouldn't say poorest country in the world, but a very, very basic country like Cuba, sent his doctor to Italy, yes, and we had the delivery of cargoes from China, Russia, that according to a certain narrative are the alleged enemies of Europe and Italy.
Yes. So, Ozan, as we've mentioned how European countries were reluctant to act, underestimated their risk. Now we're talking about millions of businesses being shut down and millions of people under lockdown. And just recently, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has released a warning saying We risk a looming food crisis unless measures are taken fast to protect the most vulnerable, keep global food supply chains alive, and mitigate the pandemic's impacts across the food system. So how will this affect the supply chain around the world?
Look, to an extent, it's already impacting the supply chain around the world, but we have to be very pragmatic in approaching this. Our system of living, both politically, socially, and economically, is not geared towards just flipping the switch off and seeing what happens, right? We have to have, and we have to move rapidly into an area where critical functions of the supply chain do get staffed, do get populated. That's energy, food supply, security, and a few others. Otherwise, we are not going to really have a society to talk of. I mean, I'm a proponent of having to look at this unfortunate pandemic in a holistic manner. And we all have to, all governments around the world have to look at the holistic cost and coordinate much better. Unfortunately, my analysis is that compared to what we did after 2008, and I agree with the ambassador completely, it was not a fair process.
Okay.
But it was much more coordinated. The global response to an event like the 2008 crisis,
Yes,
or the post 9/11 trauma, it was much more coordinated than it is right now.
Okay.
I mean, we do live in a much more fragile social, geopolitical, and economic climate. And I just think that from a supply chain perspective, all governments have to adapt a more pragmatic approach whereby after a certain time, we have to go back to a level of normalization.
We'll see about that because, I mean, the UN Secretary General urged all countries to lift sanctions due to coronavirus, bearing in mind that 25% of the world population is under US sanctions. We can count China, Cuba, Iran, Nicaragua, North Korea, Syria, Russia, and Venezuela. So, Marco, the US has become the new epicenter of this pandemic, and the number of cases are rising exponentially, leaving the President Trump in a difficult situation before the elections, and also unemployment claims hit 6.6 million this week. What's your take on the US's position, and do you agree, as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has claimed, that the Washington is losing its grip on the global order?
Well, if we have to give a proper analysis at the moment, we have to see that so far, United States that usually are leading the international community in time of crisis, this time are not leading, they are led by the events. They were unprepared, it's evident. Their hubris compromised at the beginning how to affect properly the emergency. We have been watching a flip-flop of President Trump's declaration, saying just the opposite in a matter of days. Mm-hmm. And the advice to expert was at the beginning ignored, now is followed, but maybe it's going to be too little too late. And so in a way, this crisis, we don't know if the Americans are not leading because they decided not to lead or because they cannot lead, considering the situation. But in a certain sense, what Foreign Minister Lavrov is correct in the sense that maybe after this crisis, we are going to see a different global order where there's not going to be only one leader, but a group of countries that are leading the planet. The point is, the real point is to see if the if the United States will be ready to share this leadership in the world, or the situation is going to deteriorate, considering, as you just said, that there are so many countries that are supposedly to share and join the United States in leading this situation, in leading the world, that at the moment are under American sanction, China, Russia.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are running out of time. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. It seems that the world solidarity has been sidelined as individual interests take a priority. Once again, thank you very much for your contribution.